House will please come to order. So members, we are in third reading. Are there, Chief Clerk, anything on the desk? All right. So the next bill for our consideration is third reading and final passage. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 1002. Reading clerk?
House Bill 1002, sponsored by Representative Summers. Federal COVID vaccine mandates, prohibition and remedies to, an act relating to the protection of individual rights, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We have amendments. And I understand we have amendments also coming out. So there will be more coming. First Amendment, Representative Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 1002, and I ask for your favorable consideration. Friends, in general, we've spent a tremendous amount of time on HB 001. We have hours and hours and hours. And admittedly, I feel like we need to give a little love to 1002 and have some conversation about it. If you remember when we did HB 001 and had the standing committee amendment, the good chairman of Minerals got up and he went through that amazing standing committee amendment. And the very first element of it eliminated the findings from the bill. And I went to the mic and I said, I'm really curious. We rarely, if ever, have findings in a bill. And so I'm curious about why they existed and why you took them out. And the answer was simply, you're right, we don't put findings in a bill, and that's why we took them out. Thank you very much. And we all voted, I think, unanimously to take out the findings. And here we have, so kind of keeping that in mind, here we are coming to the second bill. That bill had 4 findings, went over a page. Here we have 14 findings that go over 5 pages. So I'd just like to talk about a couple of them because, and the way that I think about findings, the way that we do think about findings is that we find the following, which pretty much is the problem, ultimately, that our bill is going to solve. So we need to believe in the findings in order for the solution, which is the rest of the bill. Okay, so 5 pages of findings. I love some of them. All right, I love some of them. And I'll even start with the first one. So if you have your bill, right? Finding number 10 puts in our Constitution. Article 1, Section 38, which we've heard about, provides that each competent adult has the right to make his or her own healthcare decisions. And I had to chuckle because we hardly ever see a feminine pronoun in our legislation. We just don't. So I was thrilled that in a piece of legislation regarding autonomy in healthcare decisions, we have both a male and a female pronoun. So thank you very much for that one. But then I want to turn to finding number 7. Okay. Finding number 7, which is on the top of page 4, says that the decision to receive a vaccination is a personal decision and should not be subject to government coercion, intrusion, or dictate. Okay. Now, nothing in here says COVID-19. Let's face it, we all know. And then I'm going to make an assumption here, but that the overwhelming majority of us really support and appreciate that we have vaccination for school kids, right? And so what we have here is a statement that is just generally against vaccination. That concerns me. I don't think most of us would want to go home and defend that statement that's in the bill. So now let's turn to finding number 5, which is on page 3, right? Finding number 5 just sets out the ambiguity that is before us. It is expected that, not that something exists, but it is expected that. Do we really legislate based on something that we don't know? This finding acknowledges that we really don't know what is going on, right? But then when you move down through into the middle to lines 11, 12, 13, right? I'll just read it to you because I think either there's a typo or there's some confusion in here. It's expected that in the upcoming days or weeks, the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services will promulgate emergency standards that will require Medicare and Medicaid healthcare workers and suppliers. And now, please, this is the part that I'm concerned about, and suppliers and all employers in Wyoming and the entire United States with 100 employees or more. The entire United States of employers or the entire United States of workers? I'm not sure. I honestly think perhaps the word "and" should have been "in," but I am not sure. So that concerns me. But now let's turn to that page 5, subsections 13 and 14, right? And for the most part, when you walk through findings, when you get to the end, even though this isn't a resolution, it would almost be along the lines of, and be it therefore resolved, this is the culmination, right? And why we should act. So 13 says, by imposing a COVID-19 vaccination mandate on the people and businesses of Wyoming, the federal government's actions constitute an abridgment of the US and Wyoming Constitution. There are no actions. Right? There are no actions right now, right? Do we want to go home and say we passed a bill based on something that didn't exist? This says actions, all right? Finally, 14. This to me is really confusing. The state of Wyoming as a sovereign entity cannot be compelled to enforce vaccination mandates from the federal government that might well be deemed an unconstitutional exercise. So let's just stop there and go back. It says the state of Wyoming as a sovereign entity cannot be compelled to enforce vaccination mandates from the federal government. But then there's equivocation that might well be deemed. Actually, if it's cannot, it has to say, as it is an unconstitutional exercise. Right there, that might well be deemed means that it would go before judicial review, right? So we don't know. We don't know. And if you keep on going, might well be deemed an unconstitutional exercise of the power of interpretation. All right, and if you ever want, I'll go back and I'll give you the Supreme Court history of that phrase, which is really problematic. But if you keep on going, to insist that the states are bound to provide means to carry into effect the duties of the federal government. Friends, I think every one of us would disagree with this. It's not the duty of the federal government to protect the health and welfare of Wyoming citizens. And in fact, we even say so with subsection 11. Subsection 11 says that various legislative enactments, it's the legislature who's responsible for promulgating the statutes regarding immunizations. It's not the federal government. That last finding implies that it is the duty of the federal government to take care of health and safety of the people of Wyoming. That's not what we want. I don't think that's what it means, what we want it to mean. So given all of that, and given our history of not having findings in bills, this amendment simply eliminates all the findings. And with that, I'd urge your favorable consideration.
Thank you. Any member for their first time, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So really what House Bill 1002 does, first on and against the amendment. 1002 is our chance to tell the federal government that we think they've overreached and we're going to appropriate some money to the governor's office to make that fight. If we want to get into a grammatical discussion of each of these sections, then bring those amendments. But I urge you to pass this, defeat the amendment and pass the bill. And you guys can judge for yourself how you want that to read. If you want to tweak a little something, that's fine. But really, this is our opportunity to push back and say to the federal government, we think we have rights, the state of Wyoming. We think our people have rights, our businesses have rights, and that we're willing to put our money into a lawsuit to fight that. So I would urge you to defeat the amendment. Thank you.
Any other member, first time on the amendment? First time on the amendment? First time on the amendment? First time, second time? Second time to the sponsor. Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So again, what this amendment does is it eliminates the findings. All right, I've just gone through 4 or 5 of them that I think honestly that each and every one of us would have some problems with if you were obligated to go home and explain how and why you voted for that particular finding. Right? We typically don't put findings in bills, and so I would encourage us to simply eliminate these. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 1, House Bill 1002. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The amendment has not been adopted. Next amendment, third reading of number 2. Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 1002 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, this shows up on page 6, line 14, under the definition of public entity. And in what I am working to do here is to make sure that the good people in our communities and around the state that rely on some federal dollars to pay for their services to not be left in a lurch and having those services not paid for. And really, what brought this to my attention is the state owns 6 different facilities around our good fine state that has folks using these facilities, living in these facilities that rely heavily on federal dollars to pay for their presence in the facilities. And if those federal dollars were not there, the state does not have anywhere in statute that would step in and have the state pay for those facilities, which then means either the folks that are residents of these facilities would have to leave, or the employees that staff these places, a couple of them are staffed 24/7 with a two staff member to 1 patient type of ratio because of the type of patients that are in these facilities. The staff would not be paid because the payments would not be coming into these facilities. And so just trying to make sure that the people of our state, these residents in our facilities, are able to be cared for in the event that anything else in this bill were to take place. And so just trying to protect the people of our state of Wyoming. So again, I would ask for a favorable consideration, and please vote aye.
Thank you. Any member for their first time on the amendment? First time. Representative Craigo on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So as I read the amendment, essentially it says any public entity that receives federal funding is exempt from the statute completely, which probably includes almost every public entity within the state of Wyoming, whether it's the state itself, counties, cities. And I understand I don't want them to lose federal funding either, but the amendment essentially guts the purpose of the bill, which is to prevent mandates from applying through our public entities. I understand we don't want to lose funding. I think the amendment regarding the stay and the appeal period takes care of that problem, that we won't put our public entities at risk of losing any money if the mandate is found to be constitutional or there is not a stay in place. All of our public entities can comply, as I read the statute, can comply with the federal statute, would not risk losing any money. So I'd ask you to vote no against the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Larson. First time on amendment 002.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The concern is we visited with some of the entities that would be impacted, that have the potential to be impacted by this. I think is sometimes by this body assumed to be that this federal money would be coming through the state. Then we distribute it back to them and they get it. And, somehow we can kind of work around that. The concern here is if you're a hospital district, or one of these other public entities, you may be billing directly Medicaid and getting that. And these are the employers in your community. These are the ones that we talked about that, in our last bill that are going to really be impacted. They indeed would be impacted by that too. If particularly we heard that from one of the associations that oversees hospitals, that some of those hospitals would be without the federal dollars would be pretty short term by that being a matter of months that they could survive without that, in providing disruption in to our healthcare for those entities or for those businesses that provide services to those that have developmental disabilities that might be getting their federal dollars directly. If they can't provide, then who's going to take care of that? And I think making sure that we don't put that in jeopardy is important. And I would hope that we would support the good representative's amendment.
Thank you. Other member for their first time on the amendment, first time. Representative Flitner, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. I represent two hospitals in my district. I've reached out to one. According to their last financial statement, 56% of the revenue for that hospital was through Medicare, another 18% through Medicaid. My apologies for using those. Roughly 50 days of cash reserves. So with layoffs and delayed payments, they could conceivably stay in business for 100 days. So for me and for my constituency, I feel like this is a very important amendment and I would urge your support.
Thank you. Representative Baker for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have a question for the sponsors. It was mentioned that there were 6 facilities. Could you just give us a little more explanation about that?
Any other member for their first time on the amendment, 3002, first time. Representative Ottman, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First for a second, please.
Any other member? Any other member, first time. First time, seeing Representative Hallinan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My comment on this would be, can't these institutions just go ahead and comply with the federal government's regulation if that's the one that is supreme at that time? And then they would have all the money that they need. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member, first time? Members, first time. First time, second time. Second time. Second time to the sponsor. To the sponsor, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer the question about what are some of the facilities, we have an adolescent facility for males and females up in the Bighorn Basin. We have retirement homes in the Bighorn Basin, 2 different categories of retirement homes there. We have a facility in Lander and a facility in Evanston. And the one in Lander really takes care of our very most vulnerable people in the state of Wyoming. The one in Evanston takes the next category of those folks. And then, as I said, we have the retirement side and assisted living care up in the Bighorn Basin. Those are the first 6 that come to mind. before you get into some of the others that can be county-based and county-owned and things like that. And so again, this is really just about making sure we protect the people of our state, that their very existence really relies on funds coming in. And as I started out by saying, there is no statute that automatically says the general fund of the state of Wyoming will pay for these services. Because of the way they're structured, it is structured to come through that federal side. And so without something to ensure that those federal dollars continue to make sure the staff is available, those patients are really left in a lurch. And so just trying to make sure we don't do that to the good citizens of the state of Wyoming. So I would encourage an aye vote on this and hopefully answered those questions. Thank you very much. Again, vote aye.
All right, members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 2, House Bill 1002. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Third reading of number 2 is adopted. Next amendment is 003. That is a delete enacting clause, so that will be placed at the last. Next amendment for consideration is 004, Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, I muddled this one up a little bit, so I brought another one for a little later. So I will withdraw third reading amendment number 4 and thank the body. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
3004 is withdrawn. Thank you. Next one for our consideration, 3005, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move third reading amendment number 5 to House Bill 1002 and ask to further divide the amendment. And I'll dispense with the amendment fairly quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll divide page 1, lines 41 through 44, and page 2, lines 1 through 3 as division 1. Again, that is page 1, lines 41 through 44, and page 2, lines 1 through 3 as division 1, the rest being division 2.
Thank you. So confirming to the body, division 1 is lines on page 1, 41 through 44, page 2, 1 through 3, division 2 is the remainder of the amendment. Proceed with division 1. Is that my assumption?
Yes,
Representative
sir,
Brown,
Mr.
please
Speaker.
proceed.
Thank you. Body, I would ask you, this was actually almost just completely covered by the last amendment. I would ask you to vote no.
Further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of division 1, please say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
The amendment has failed. Division 2, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, division 2 could be further amended and further divided if we want to, but really all I do is go into the findings here. And the first portion down to line 12, all I do is basically state that the vaccines were developed, authorized, and used underneath the 45th President of the United States. And then I get rid of the language that we use in there dictating out somebody's name. We just don't do that in statute. We don't like using proper names. So I've actually removed the president's name, and I've said the 45th and the 46th president. That's all this really is just saying that underneath the 45th president, these vaccines were developed, they were approved, they were authorized, and then they've continued underneath the 46th president. Then going down, I actually add to the findings, and on the findings, I say the decision to implement hiring practices for private entities is a personal decision and should not be subject to government coercion, intrusion, or dictate. So this is a similar language of what's right below, basically just stating very similar language. I just feel like it's important to make sure that we stand for the principles that we were elected upon of making sure that we don't have government dictate over intruding there. And then if you continue the area there, we renumber, but the area that we just killed, next area is Article 1, Section 38. We talk about the Constitution, but I think it's also important to make sure that we put in context what we're talking about. So I include subsection C of Article 38, or Article 1, Section 38 of the Wyoming Constitution provides that the legislature may determine reasonable and necessary restrictions on the rights granted to protect health and general welfare of the people. We renumbered there as necessary. And then on to page 2, we changed the date for the appropriation here. And really all we're doing here and changing the date for the appropriation is just authorizing the appropriation to go out a little bit further. And really what this boils down to is something that I alluded to yesterday. We still have litigation going on underneath the Affordable Care Act that's been in place for over 12 years now. And so I'm just authorizing this opportunity to continue litigation out until 2030. Who knows? We may be even going out until 2040, but this was just a date to pick out and give a little bit more than the end of this fiscal biennium. So make sure that we have a little bit more time. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll stand for any questions.
Any member on this amendment? First time on this Division 2, Amendment 3005, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I kind of like the findings the way they are, and I guess I would resist this amendment. And I'm not going to go through point by point, but I think they're pretty obvious. So on and against the amendment.
Any other member, first time on the division, Representative Yin, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, so, in this body, we have rules of decorum, and the intent there is so we debate ideas, not people. And I do think this change to findings to try to reduce the temperature a little bit for our people is to just make sure that we're debating the idea that we don't like. It's the federal overreach. The second we start talking about people, we get into the whole reason why we don't try to use proper nouns. So I would urge you to vote for the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any other member, first time, second time before the sponsor, to the sponsor, Representative Brown.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the good majority floor leader's comments. Strictly what I'm putting in here is factual. I'm not putting anything in here that is opinion. There's no opinion-based findings whatsoever. We simply strike a name of a president, put in the 45th and 46th president. We cite the Constitution. This is pretty straight and forward here. If we're going to find facts in a piece of legislation, I think they should be facts. And I have put absolutely nothing in here that leaves open interpretation. So I would urge an aye vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, we're voting on third reading amendment number 5, Division 2. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
Chair is in doubt. All those in favor, please rise. Thank you. All those opposed. This will be a close vote based on who's in the chamber and who's not. The motion is adopted 28-23. So Division 1 of 3005 was failed. Division 2 has been adopted. Next amendment for your consideration is House 3006. Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to move amendment number 6 to third reading for House Bill 1002 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, you saw a similar amendment to this for House Bill 1001. Basically, this kind of clarifies the language to ensure that we're not leaving anyone in the cold. So I would ask for your support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on the amendment. Representative Craigo, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just say that I support the amendment. One of the reasons I believe the sponsor brought it was to make the language the same in both bills. So that in case both are enacted into law, we don't have two different standards of when the law applies, when it doesn't apply. And so the language essentially is identical. We had to move around a few things to make it work, but please vote aye.
Further discussion on the amendment, further discussion on 3006. Further discussion. Seeing none, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 1002, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
The amendment is adopted. House 3006 is adopted. Representative Walters, would you take the chair?
Go ahead, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move third reading amendment number 7 to House Bill 1002 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members of the House, you will note that there were 3 kind of issues that we brought forth. One of those issues went forth in 1001, the bill we passed earlier. The second issue is in this, but there's a very closely associated third issue that we don't have a horse in the race for anymore. And so I think it's completely appropriate that we place it in this bill. It comes out actually out of a personal bill that I also had that was tabled by our good committee number 9. And I think this is a perfect spot for it. So this basically is saying the notwithstandings are all our current vaccine requirements in statute. So notwithstanding all of those, we're not messing with anything that's in current statute. This is COVID-19 specific, as you can see on line 9. And we're just saying, look, if it's a public entity serving the citizens of Wyoming, those folks have access to those services. Their vaccination status should have no bearing on whether they have access to those services. So that's that is the amendment, and I'd ask for your favorable consideration. Stand for any questions.
Discussion for your first time, discussion for the first time on amendment third reading amendment 007 to House Bill 1002. Any discussion for the first time? Seeing none, any follow-up from the presenter? Seeing none, I apologize, I didn't see you on the screen. Representative Stith, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just wanted to ask the bringer of the amendment how that would play out for the specific example of, say, a woman who's pregnant, who's eligible for Title 19 Medicaid benefits, and the state participates in that, of course. And let's imagine she's going to have a C-section, and the hospital says, hey, before we'll do your C-section, we want you to be vaccinated. Would this amendment affect that situation one way or the other? I just don't know. I'm just asking the question. Thank you.
Anyone else for the first time? I missed that because he was on the screen, so I will allow for the first time if there is anyone else for the first time. I don't see anyone on the screen. Apologize for my missing that. Don't see anyone rushing to the mics. So with that, Mr. Speaker, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So members, I think this is where it does get complex, because we have public entities such as hospital districts or county memorials who would be subject to this, or someone who was eligible for a public benefit such as our Medicaid benefit, and it would apply to those. But if it's a completely private entity that there is no public funds flowing to or for the services, then it would not apply to them. So public entity is the key part of this. So it depends on where the services are, and the definition, as you know, is within this bill is public entity. So yes, there are instances where it would apply for a public entity. The public entity component is receiving public funds. So it's not just a cut and dry, no one can ever do it. This is specific to public entity. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd ask for your favorable consideration.
We are voting on third reading amendment 007 to House Bill 1002. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Amendment number 007, third reading amendment 007 to House Bill 1002 has passed. And with that, I'll turn the chair back over to you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, members. Next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 8. Third reading amendment number 8. I see the representative gathering her materials. Thank you. Representative Oakley, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to move Amendment 8, is it, to House Bill 1002?
Is that inquisitive
Yes.
or a statement?
And I'd like to ask for your-
Please go ahead. You have moved it and please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to ask for the body's favorable consideration. So what I have done here is added "or other government" into the title and into a couple places on the bill, specifically, if they're still numbered the same, on page 6, it's section B. And so what it says is that no public entity shall enforce a mandate of the federal government. And so what I'm effectively trying to do here is add other governments. I know there are plenty of other governmental entities. And I know we've discussed obviously the federal government a lot here. But there could be other governmental action taken that would be a mandate. And I think if you specifically look, it's not been included, but public entity is defined. And I've got it here, and it's referenced in, again, if the numbering's changed, but I have it page 6, line 13. But public entity means the state of Wyoming, any state office, board, council, commission, separate operating agency, department, institution, or other instrumentality or operating unit of the state, including the University of Wyoming, any political subdivision of the state, any county, city, town, school district, community college district, or any public corporation of the state. So when we talk about these public entities, a lot of them are, city, county, state, and we've talked a lot, and I think we've heard from our constituents that they don't want governmental mandates. We spent so much time on House Bill 1001 appropriately, but that was that balance between a business having rights, of course, and balancing that with the individual. This is different because what we're talking about is government mandates. And I think a lot of us stand for that. That's not the way it should be. It shouldn't just be handed down from the government. And so I think this is probably something that would have been maybe more addressed. We've certainly done a lot of addressing here this week. But nonetheless, this ended up being kind of a fast-tracked process. And I think perhaps we missed this, or at least I'm submitting that maybe we did, that we could include some other governmental mandates beyond just federal. So if you look at it again, it's simple, fairly straightforward, changing not only to federal, but or other governmental mandates in addition to federal. So with that, I ask for your favorable consideration and stand for questions.
Thank you. Representative Summers, first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Not on or against this amendment, but I do have one question for the bringer. And so I thought about this, right? And so I agree, but we have a lot of, let's say it's a town or a county or anything that has an elected board. I have a real hard time dictating down to duly elected people at the local level. So while I personally don't think they should do it, if a town and its people decided they may want to do it, maybe that's another story. And so I just want to ask the good bringer if she thought about whether, she wanted to include governmental entities that have their own, duly elected boards or councils, or trying to bypass the local level.
Thank you. Representative Banks for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. on and against the amendment. I think I would echo the good representative's comments. I'm always concerned when we try to restrict what other governing bodies in the state can do, who are frankly a lot more closer to those people as electorates than we are. You know, as a general rule, we're only here once a year. The city council may meet twice a month, the county commission twice a month, and there's a lot more opportunity for residents to push back on those folks than there is on us. And so I'm always hesitant when we are trying to consolidate that at a state level rather than allowing those duly elected officials to make those decisions for their own communities, neighborhoods, whatever the case is.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Bear, first time. Excuse me, Representative completely Burt, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm actually in favor of this, so I'm going to stand in and actually support. To me, it looks like it's a support for a level of nullification, which is exactly what I just asked for about an hour ago. So thank you. I'm in favor.
Any other member, first time? First time. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just curious, does this, I think under the definition that this may include a school board. It may be if you have a public hospital board, if it's a public hospital. So if that's correct, then I would just, if you could clarify, please. Thank you.
Any other member, first time? First time. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, so last year, I remember one of the few things we got passed concerning this COVID debacle that we're in was that after a period of time, I think it was 2 weeks, and I think this went through the whole system, the locals would take over, would take charge of the rules, regulations, mandates of the pandemic. I guess I'd like some feedback on that if that's the case.
Thank you. Any other member, first time? Any other member for the first time? First time going, second time. Representative Ottman, I will give you that, grant you that. You go ahead. I wasn't looking that way when you were walking, and so I apologize. For your first time, Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the privilege of keeping this up for some more information, I believe that when it says any other government, it doesn't say governmental body or local government or anything. Maybe it needs to be specified what kind of government, like a national government or so maybe that needs to be defined a little bit, but I don't see where it says governing boards anywhere. It says government. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion on first time? First time. Representative Larson Lloyd.
So any other government rule?
Please go ahead and address the chair.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. So getting sloppy. It's getting sloppier. So I also concerned would this also be an effort if it says any government that it would consider trying to impose this on tribal governments as well?
Further discussion, first time on the amendment, first time on the amendment. First time, second time on the amendment. Second time to the sponsor, Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I dislike the whole vote your conscience enough that I don't know. But I mean, I suppose at the end of the day, this is, yes, it goes to governmental action. Is that something that you think we are here to do, to say we don't want governments to mandate? I know the last speaker, mentioned, could it affect tribal? That is something that I think I would answer in the affirmative. And there've been layoffs in Fremont, in a local school district in my county, specifically because of a mandate. So I think it's on the table that that's not what we want to do for the state of Wyoming is to have governmental mandates. So the speaker also said something about water districts. I said, I think we're fairly okay that water districts aren't going to be doing vaccine mandates, but anyway, it obviously, I ask for your favorable consideration. I feel like this is what we were here to do. So I ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Members, we're voting on third reading, amendment number 8, House Bill 1002. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
Amendment has not been adopted. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. Thank you. All those opposed, thank you. All those opposed, please rise. The amendment is not adopted. 2426. The next amendment, the chief clerk tells me there's no more in the queue, so the last amendment is 3003. Madam Minority Floor Leader Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 3 to HB 1002, and I will remove it at the appropriate time. Friends, when I started with my first amendment, I said that I thought that this bill deserved a little bit more love. And so I thought that this would give us the opportunity to have that conversation. You know, up until kind of one amendment that we just passed, I was going to tell you that the amendments that we passed, the second amendment that we passed, as well as I think it was the fourth one, right, did a lot of the kind of what I would call fixing that I would have talked about with a delete the enacting clause. That being said, we just passed an amendment that I find deeply concerning, and I didn't get to the mic quick enough or think about it well enough. And that's the amendment 7, that says that no public entity shall require a person to receive or show proof of a COVID-19 vaccination for the person to receive or qualify for any public benefit. We had a good question from a representative on the screen from the southwest portion of the state who gave the example of a woman who gave birth and gets Medicaid. And I said, oh my goodness, let's think about this a little bit more. And honestly, friends, I think right now that is so important and so relevant that we need to vote no on this bill. So I just pulled it up. Last year, we had 6,565 births in the state of Wyoming. A third of them were to moms who are on Medicaid. A third of them, right? Over 2,000 of them. We're putting in jeopardy the public benefit that honestly, when you think about it, doesn't really go to that woman, but goes to the hospital who has done that birth. By passing that amendment, we're putting, right, that woman who has to apply for it, but really the hospitals in jeopardy of getting that benefit, because 10 to 1, they are going to be required to have a vaccine, right? That kind of makes healthcare sense. I mean, it's likely. And what we're seeing right here is an amendment that says that the person will no longer be qualified for that public benefit, for that Medicaid. So because of that, I would encourage a no vote on this bill. The other two things for you to consider, one is what I would consider the complicated kind of findings that you need to explain. And also, we haven't talked about that last portion of the bill, which is $250,000 that's being parked for suing the feds. That one there, I know we already have it and the governor's office can already do it. We probably don't need to park that money. But I am concerned about this amendment that we just passed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member first time, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. On and against this amendment and for the bill. And unless I'm mistaken, we did not pass the last amendment. I believe we did not pass the last amendment. And I think the speaker can verify that one way or the other. And then on, as it relates to the example of the person with Medicaid, the second amendment that was passed says that except that public entities does not include an entity receiving federal funding that by complying with subsection B of this section would lose that federal funding. So we passed an amendment that was kind of a get out of jail free card for all federal funding entities. And so I don't think that example is now pertinent. And so I would just urge you to vote aye on the bill, and thank you.
Any other member first time, Representative Yin.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment, on and against the bill. So let's see, how many days have we been in session now? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. 4 days, $25,000 a pop for two bills. The second one where it's, let's beat my chest real hard and say, go home, say we did something. We challenge the federal government. I'm not sure how this bill does anything different than what the governor was already doing. So are we saying we got here first because the governor wasn't there yet? But there's no rules and regs yet. So I'm still confused on what I'm going to tell my constituents when I get home. Was it worth it, us coming here? Did we do something useful? I think this bill, we can pass it. We can send it to the other side. We can have the governor sign it or veto it. I have no idea what he's going to do. But I think when I go home to my constituents, I'm going to say, we did what I put in that letter, what some of my colleagues and I put in that letter, which is we beat our chest, $100,000. And we have more money to spend till we get there. So I'll ask you to vote no, and let's all go home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member first time, second time to the sponsor, Madam Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just to clarify, we did pass Amendment 7. And Amendment 7 is the one that is in relationship to a public entity asking for a proof of vaccination. However, I believe I also said the last amendment. It wasn't the last amendment. We didn't pass the last amendment, but we did pass the one that I was talking about, which is number 7. That being said, I do think now that Amendment 2 might be that get out of jail free card that would prevent that egregious circumstance that I gave you. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure of it. Again, that Amendment 2 is a good one. All right, all that to say, I would still urge a no vote. All right, what we're talking about here in general is taking away local control, right? It says no public entity shall enforce any mandate standard of the federal government, et cetera, right? This is about local control. What about our local school boards? What about our local healthcare hospital boards, all of the above, right? So why would we take away their rights to do what's best in their own communities? Why would we put $250,000 in another coffee can when we know that the governor already has the ability to sue and honestly does it all of the time? So with that, Mr. Speaker, I respectfully withdraw the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Minority Floor Leader. House Bill 1002, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Crago. Duncan.
Aye.
Eklund. Air. Excused. Flitner. Fortner.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Please say aye, Representative Fortner.
Aye.
Thank you.
Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman excused. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Excused. Nyman. Newsom excused. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton.
Aye.
Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stith.
Aye.
Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Excused. Wharf.
Aye.
Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Closing vote. The vote is closed. 41 aye, 14 no, 5 excused.
House Bill 1002, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 1002 is passed the House. So members, just a few house cleaning things. We've got a little more things up front and the chief clerk's got to do a couple things here. So one, I requested, because of some of the discussion this morning on the floor regarding censure, I asked LSO provide a memo on that. It's been emailed to the entire body that outlines the rules that we think are applicable to a potential motion for censure for whatever purpose of a member. So it's there for your review if that's of interest to you. Second thing is our colleagues down the hall have adjourned for the weekend. They will reconvene early Monday morning. However, they did not send us a COVID-19 related bill. They did send us a bill that is related to another subject. And I guess it's not my intention to introduce that bill and refer it to committee. If a member of this body would like to bring the similar motion that the minority floor leader did this morning, we have it available, and you are welcome to proceed with that. It would mean that what we would likely do, well, I don't know what we're going to likely do, but I'm going to suggest if you wanted to do that, we would, and it's pulled out of my desk, I would refer it to the proper committee today. They could notice their meeting potentially for next Wednesday morning. We could take it on general file Wednesday afternoon, and then I would suggest you accelerate it to third reading. This is a Scribner error bill. I am, like I said, I am not intending to introduce it, but I don't want to inhibit anybody in this body from making a suggestion that they would want to, for this body to address it. as that is the sole piece of legislation that our colleagues down the hall have provided us. They will have a full day next week, starting with on Monday and 3 readings. Without this bill, without any bills before us, based on what I've told you, we will not convene until Wednesday at 11 a.m. We were thinking later, but after discussing more a little bit, if the Senate finishes 3rd reading Wednesday morning, we want to be available to receive what they would have done on House Bill 1001, 1002. And so that's where we are. That's where we are. Anybody have any questions about the bills or the schedule? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So hypothetically, let's say the body down the hall, and I know it's not customary to, but because of process, I guess I have a question. If they are unable to pass those bills either out of committee or on the floor down the hall, would there be any reason for us to come back to have a perfunctory gaveling out if there are no bills before the body? Or is there a possibility that we may not have to come back Wednesday if the 2 bills we've sent do not make it through all 3 readings or committee of the process?
Well, there's a lot of ifs in that. And just like the process at this end of the hall, I would not care to speculate on the process at that end. But I do think it's accurate to assume that they will not accelerate any of the readings. So we won't have a read on that. I mean, we'll know early in the week if something doesn't make it out of committee or committee of the whole. We will not know about, if it does, we will not know about 3rd reading until Wednesday at some point. So recall that our rules allow remote participation, and Wednesday would be a concurrence report. We would be looking at a concurrence report and voting on a concurrence report. So folks that did not want to travel down would have that option. We just need to know that you're interested in that. The second day, without concurrence, we would go to conference committees, maybe wrap them up that same day, and then there'd be conference committee reports to vote on hopefully Wednesday. So I think that's the best I can do to provide any guidances. But to be clear, and I want to take a step back to some of my comments this morning, the special rules that were adopted as we began this session that allowed remote participation are good for the special sessions. They're not applicable to the budget session. And what the action that I took with regard to Representative Harshman this morning was specific to this special session. So his privilege to appear remotely for this special session is what I rescinded, as this body gave me that ability. And that was one of the things that I chose to exercise. So I don't know if that helps, but Wednesday, folks that want to Zoom in and are muted when appropriate are welcome to do so. Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So just to be clear on, in anticipation of an action by a member that was mentioned this morning, would, if that is followed through on, which the memo relates to, I realize that we could participate remotely, but for a motion like that, in particular for censure, I want to be present. So would that take place, in your opinion, on Wednesday when we gavel back in?
Thank you, Representative Sweeney. As I anticipate that all of our business could be completed on Wednesday, any further action by this body during this special session would automatically have to occur on Wednesday. So it's not eligible on Monday, Tuesday, because we're not in session. Wednesday, we would be. Off chance we go to Thursday, it's possible, but I would say, if you're particularly interested in that issue, you can speak with the representative that brought it forward about future plans, but My anticipation is Wednesday is likely the only day we'll be in session next week unless something flows into Thursday. Now, there is a question about veto override. And thank you, Chief Clerk, for reminding me of that. We will know better where we are by Wednesday, of course, with the actions of the other body as we consider our conference committee and our concurrence report, and then potentially conference committees. We'll know better if we want to reserve a date for veto override. If it was delivered on Wednesday, we'd have to come back on Monday, I believe, 3 days. We'd have to adjourn until Monday and then take up any potential veto override. So I apologize. Thank you, Chief Clerk, for reminding me of the possibility that we would want to reserve the right to veto override. So is there any questions on this matter, or is this on this matter? Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just wondering if we could get another form that would allow us to waive a portion of our compensation for those other days.
Representative Baker, I honestly did not hear what you stated. So maybe try a different mic. That one has a lot of echo for us up here for some reason.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just wondering if we would get another form that would allow us to waive a portion of our compensation for those other days.
Absolutely. So the waiving of your salary and per diem, that can be taken care at the LSO main office. Obviously, now we're adding more days to it. You can waive additional days should you want to. So I think you can just add to that sheet that you have with the additional days. You don't have to do it before you depart today. We can do it. You can do it next week when you come back on Wednesday. And I think by Wednesday, there will be a sheet provided for all the days that you may want to waive. So thank you for that request. Messages from the Senate.
Message number 100. Mr. Speaker, the bills listed below failed to pass the Senate third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 1003, COVID-19 Discriminatory Practices Prohibition. Ayes 13, noes 15, 1 excused, 1 conflict. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message number 101. Mr. Speaker, the bills listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 1019, Wyoming Gaming Commission, error correction. Ayes 19, noes 9, excused 1, conflict 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
All right, Mr. Majority Floor Leader. Madam Clerk, is there anything else on the desk? Any privileges of the floor? Mr. Majority Floor Leader, that clears the deck. And the
Mr.
desk.
Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until Wednesday, November 3rd at 11 a.m.
You've heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn until 11 a.m. November 3rd, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The House is adjourned.